Welcome to DXgov governance discussion for Wednesday, June 15th, 1500 UTC. Let's start first with the proposal roundup here. We've got some proposals, good amount of proposals on mainnet and xDie. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Yeah, actually, let's start first with Gnosis changes because I'm there now. So we've got a couple different proposals here at the top. These actually are scheme deregister proposals. We had put these in about 2 weeks ago, and I think 5 of them went through, but these 2 seem to have gotten stuck, and I think Augusto's looking into that there. Those at the top. I think these were actually schemes involved in the original deployment of DXDAO, so it's a bit hard to figure that out. But yeah, this was part of our spring cleaning effort for the schemes there. And then we have Space Inch development work for May 2022 for, I think it's a payment for 36,000 in USDC. And then we have a couple of different buyback proposals. We have Milton from the DXgov team's proposal, Melanie from contributor X proposal. We have Philip 16. I'll use that one. Proposal 2 has been helping out on Swapper, and then Ether Labs AB. Vinky providing help on Swapper there. And then DevX AG DXDAO SDA. This is a proposal that's also on mainnet. I don't know, Dave, if you want to chat briefly about this. There's some good discussion in the forum and maybe a preview of how people will be able to take advantage of this in the future.
We might be missing Dave.
Oh.
Which
is funny because I just talked to Dave.
Yeah, he was
10 minutes ago
chatting about this call. But
yeah,
this is interesting. I actually haven't read through the full text here, but I mean, if I understand what this is, it's about making sure that DXDAO can actually pay contributors in different locations.
Yeah, and so this was maybe his internet went out. He was getting delivery when I was there. But anyway, so this was on the back of a proposal that was about payment facilitation service providers, and this is work that Dave's been doing regarding setting up a entity in the EU to help facilitate payments. And so I think this will help most of the EU folks pretty well. And so this is like the first initiative of this, like the first basically to fund this through DXDAO, and so then the payments would actually come for contributors who were contributing to DXDAO would be able to receive payments from DevX AG. And then, Dave, you are here. Sorry, I tried to...
Chris, if I could have a minute before Dave speaks, something just crossed my mind, and it's something that Russ would probably be very much interested in. I just realized we could have a discussion on the public forum, say, for a week, and then someone could submit a signal proposal. And looking from my perspective, I just assume, which is wrong, that it's the same text, but someone could pass something that is different from what we've been discussing on the forum. So somehow in the future iterations of DXvote, we should have a note where it's an embedded link from a post, or it's a freshly typed text that could be different from the post, so people pay attention to any differences. And also in the future, as we'll have our forum inside DXvote, it could help like with Ceramic, where we have immutable versions of discussions and not some posts on a centralized forum that someone could change.
Yeah, I think that's good for like the discussion on DXvote and integrating with the forum. It makes sense there. Is there a difference from the forum here, or because I think in general, right? Of course, like what is on chain or what is the IPFS here is what ultimately matters. And so whenever I'm kind of working on a proposal, if I do make changes, I try to note that in the DAO Talk thread, just be like, made these changes at this time to kind of document it. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's of course what's going on in the proposal on chain and in the actual proposal text through IPFS. Dave, I don't know if you wanted to talk any more about this DevX AG. I gave a brief overview, maybe not as good as you could do.
Sure. I mean, I missed your brief overview. but I think this has been something that's been worked on for the while, and it mainly addresses, particularly for DXDAO currently, the issues for European contributors, where it can be very challenging, depending on jurisdiction you live in, to receive income. And so DevX is just a company in Switzerland which can kind of like take the whole legal and regulatory burden of contributors. And I mean, the advantages for each contributor is slightly different here and there. I think the main one is, of course, VAT. So as soon as you enter the EU, every country has their own VAT rate, of course, and which is a value-added tax for those who don't know. And it's a tax that is charged on every service and good which goes to an end consumer, to a customer. Of course, in our eyes, DXDAO isn't a customer; it's a business. But given that you're not able to provide the tax authority with a company where DXDAO is incorporated or a tax number, VAT is typically due on all contributor payments or any payment really you receive for services you provide to the DAO. I believe the average VAT rate is around 21 to 23% in Europe, which is a very high burden because after you deduct the VAT rate, you still have to pay your income tax, etc. And so Switzerland is somewhat more efficient there. It's of course also not in the EU, but in the European Economic Area, so it has somewhat more sovereignty. And the VAT rate, for example, in Switzerland is 7.7%, so that's already a big kind of like advantage there. Then for other contributors, it's also just moving crypto into a bank account, right? So especially in Scandinavia or some Eastern European countries, they just simply don't accept any crypto banking at all, right? So it also allows developers to just receive their salary as a regular bank transfer, as you would in a normal company, or you could even, get half and half, whatever the contributor really prefers, right? But the main goal here is really to take off that like legal, regulatory, and tax burden of contributors who are currently facing those issues.
Yeah. Cool. And this is actually the Gnosis chain proposal, but then the mainnet proposal, maybe we can switch over there actually. The mainnet proposal actually sends funds. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it sends. So this is how it'll probably work moving forward: is that any funds sent to DevX AG will also incur VAT. So it's sending 100K, but it's actually in the proposal sending 107.7 just to the added VAT.
Cool.
Dave, just had a couple of questions. So, I mean, I think this is a really valuable setup for those that haven't been able to figure out another setup. Is there any, like just sending money to a random Swiss entity, like where we don't know the people, we don't know anything about them? Like, is there any security or comfortness for like, we know that this entity won't just walk away with the money, or we're just sending them money and hoping that they'll eventually pay it out to contributors. And then that the fees of $3,000 a month plus 5% of all payments, my guess that it seems kind of high, but is that standard, do you think, or is that for that type of service? Because I've seen other ones that are cheaper, but they seem less professional too. This seems very professional. Yeah.
Well, on the first matter, I think, there always is as soon as you go into traditional world, there is some like trust there, right? But I think the issue is to like regularly top up the amount instead of like sending, for example, 2 million now and say that, it'll pay for payments over the next 2 years. It's a more ad hoc top up. In fact, contributors could also just claim their payment and send it to the DevX ETH address. That would also be an option moving forward. It's really more a UI UX stuff, right? Like if the company already holds some funds and the proposal passes, the bank transfer could happen immediately, right? In the other case, the funds would be moved to the address. The address then has to be KYC AML from the bank side to make sure the funds are okay. And that's also kind of where the costs come in. So the thing in Switzerland is like, it's a very expensive jurisdiction. And like even in Switzerland, you don't have you can't go to a regular bank and like do these activities, right? You have to use a private bank that is like aware of what you're doing, aware that the funds come from a DAO. And I like the banking costs alone are 20,000 a year just to open a bank account. Then you have directorship and financial costs, which is another 10,000 just for them to be like listed. And then it's on top of that, you have regular banking fees and pro rata hours for accounting, directorship services, etc. And so that's one thing, that Switzerland will be more expensive than other jurisdictions, but other jurisdictions could also, for example, if you get your salary paid from if you get your salary paid from a tax haven, then you'll again run into issues with withholding taxes, etc. So, the costs are due to the choice of jurisdiction, I would say. There are probably more efficient ones in terms of cost-wise there, but down the line, you'll probably start running into issues again when you go to tax havens or move funds through like less, regulated countries. That's like one of the main issues you have in Europe. I mean, Europe has like a list of non-conforming tax havens, which you can check, where a lot of people do incorporate companies. But then again, receiving funds from there, you would again run into like a lot of issues just with, I think withholding taxes are like 35%. So if you get
35, yeah.
a transfer from like the British Virgin Islands or Cayman Islands, like the bank would automatically withhold 35% just because it comes from a tax haven, So that is a thing that Switzerland is more expensive, yeah, for sure.
Dave, can I also add like two things? I think from the quotes that I had received like quite some time ago regarding other kind of developer, LLC type companies based in Europe or the European Economic Area, the fees were even higher, actually. I think closer to 10%, because I think they were also accounting for their time to deal with the transactions. So I think that this is somewhat lower, relatively speaking. And then the other thing is, well, I'm not sure how many contributors here need to do this, but if you're usually like, for example, if you're in Portugal or other places, you usually have to register your activity, even if it's as an independent contractor, or even if it's just as maybe a regular contracted work with DXgov, which I think a lot of these locations would consider more long-term employment. So another way to kind of confirm that, the money needs to be given to the individual, just kind of like what you all do with the I don't want to say Portugal right now, but I mean the Polish dev shop, is you just have individual contributors do a work contract also with DevX, saying how much funds and stuff they're owed every time they basically do the invoice. I think that would also maybe suffice to show that the money won't be, used for other purposes than what's set on chain.
I think another important point here too is I'll post that this, we had just passed this signal proposal calling for payment facilitators, and so I think this is a piece of that puzzle, and it's like an important step, like specifically for Europe, but it's not like the whole picture, right? So like it still will be possible to interact with entities in the United States or like other jurisdictions. We maybe emulate what a MakerDAO does as well, and I think the cost will probably be less in some cases and more in others, and only like a certain amount of contributors actually even need these services. So like, if this is something like a 15% premium over what DXgov is actually paying people, but like if you look at it as a whole, it's maybe only like half of the contributors at most that need it, and then that can even be distributed amongst different entities as well. And so I think the premium over like the contributor payments like will probably average out to be something like around 5% or so, or less maybe even. And I think like one of the key things here is having it be redundant, right? Like having it be distributed, and so that there aren't centralized points of failure, going back kind of the key point about DXgov trying to be as decentralized as possible. But yeah, like just to pointing out that this is like part of a bigger picture. It's not like the only solution.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think like the largest overhead here again is like VAT, which is actually taxes, right? So that's not like, of course, that's just going to the Swiss government. And I think in a traditional company, you would have like a much higher tax burden anyway, right? And like DXDAO has, due to the nature of being a DAO, we're not based in any jurisdiction. We've never paid any tax anywhere, right? Taxes would be much higher. And here, of course, taxes are only paid on funds actually moved through this specific dev shop, right? Like on other jurisdictions, like in the US, for example, you don't have VAT. So I think if you average it out later on, it will definitely be lower. Yeah.
I have a question. Like we mentioned the dev shop that we've outsourced, and like they are a company that pays those people tax and security, almost like Opolis. And like what the proposal makes me imagine is more of a money transmitter. And there's this regulation around money transmitters that ask them to KYC and AML their clients.
Yeah,
And also there won't be like any security in terms of like healthcare and stuff. So it's like it's not an issue that I have. My question is like, would regulators see it as a dev shop or not?
So that's a great question. That's actually the one great thing about this proposal, and I think needs to be thought about generally with everyone who is not actually working as a contractor, but actually works full time for the DAO, is especially in Europe, there are requirements for Social Security that, the likelihood of someone like the government or something reaching out and, suing DXDAO, can they sue DXDAO, is a question, of course, but like the dev shop should definitely consider and start accounting for Social Security. Because it actually is set up in a way, fortunately, not to be what you're talking about is like a money transmitter in the United States. Like obviously anyone who has a cryptocurrency account and receives money into that account and then doesn't tell the bank that they're essentially just transferring that money to like another person is an unlicensed money transmitter. And the fines there can be like $5,000 a day. Luckily for this particular dev shop is that it's basically built for the purpose of taking payments from the DAO, and the Swiss banks and the Swiss government are aware of this. But yeah, you're right. Like that last portion is people should, if they're working full time for the DAO, can start associating Social Security and other basic employment law issues that would come up in the jurisdiction that they're residing.
Yeah. And I think like it is also advisable that, we do have at DXDAO a contributor stipend to set up a legal entity. I think it is generally advisable that even if people do want to use DevX to receive their payment, that they still set up a limited liability company in their own jurisdiction and receive payment through that. That way, I mean, there's no KYC really. The only data shared is really the company's data, right, rather than the individual's data. But it is also an option to employ someone full-time and register as an actual employer if that's something the DAO ever decides to do, of course, right? But that does, like Tammy said, that has a lot more implications with Social Security, healthcare, pension contributions and stuff. It is something that is possible, but I think at least in the near immediate term, it makes more sense, that people do make use of the stipend that's already out there to incorporate their legal liability company, limited liability company. And typically it also works out better tax-wise, if you have a company, because then you can write off your expenses through the company and stuff. But yeah, theoretically employment would also be possible, but that would be, then you have a contract. You have in Europe, we don't really have at-will employment, so it's a much higher burden to both the DAO and DevX, I would say.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But if anyone is interested in that based off of their situation, maybe raise it at some point into the DAO and go from there.
Cool. Yeah, I've been telling everyone I meet in crypto that I don't care if you're an accountant, designer, developer, lawyer, you should figure out how to get paid by DAOs, because that's what's going to be the big consumers going forward of all types of services. So yeah, this is exciting to see this, and yeah, hopefully a relief to a lot of our EU contributors who've been experiencing headaches. Cool. And then There's a couple other proposals on mainnet. We have the Augusto LDXD bulk withdrawal. This is the second one. I corrected it. And so there was also one from Violet on Gnosis chain for the DXD withdrawal. So it's good to see some of those there. And I believe there is now a post in the forum about step-by-step or on how to do that from Ali. And Ali is trying to meet with everyone before she goes through that just to make sure that the numbers are right and kind of confirming that there. So reach out to Ali if there's any questions there. And then there are two proposals here are kind of worth highlighting. One is the staking ETH stakewise 1 of 4. This is boosted and would pass in 7 hours and 47 minutes. This is referencing a signal proposal that passed a couple weeks ago about staking 2,000 ETH with stakewise. This is the first of potentially 4 proposals, and then the second one is actually just boosted or pending boost right now. We'll get to that in a second, so maybe let's table the conversation for right now and just get through the rest of these proposals. And then there's I guess the last one here is the update swapper.eth content hash to swapper v1.00 beta 13. So another swapper release here, getting more frequent here. I don't know if anyone from the swapper team wants to say anything. There were some good notes listed. I'm not sure if they're on listed here, but so good notes from here. Here we go. Enhanced EcoBridge experience, new eco router integrations, do-it-yourself farming, and gas tracker for Polygon. So nice job to all the swapper team for getting this release out. And it will need a vote in 20 hours, starting in 20 hours. So that's it for the proposal roundup. As I said, we're going to get to the stakewise discussion in just a minute here. But I did just want to kind of talk briefly about some of the discussion items. The first one is just DXvote and Alchemy in general. They're actually both working, I think, fine right now. I think Alchemy, even on Gnosis chain, is actually working. Sorry, about an hour ago, was checking that. And so I know that there's been some kind of inconsistencies with that. A lot of it is due to RPC issues on Gnosis chain. So do try to install a new, put the new RPC in your MetaMask if you're having trouble loading Gnosis chain on DXvote. But just wanted to kind of highlight that and know that, yes, there is maybe some trouble with submitting proposals or getting there, and for everyone to be a little bit more vigilant about kind of looking and checking on things and knowing things going forward. But as I said, I think everything is actually working right now with Alchemy kind of getting back up. And then, DXvote, as long as you have the right RPC, seems to be working. I don't know if there was any comment from Dave or maybe Augusto or Ross on kind of DXvote stuff here. We've been troubleshooting some stuff there, and best place to look in the support channel in DXgov.
Not really. I submitted a pull request where I fixed some issues on the DXvote side. Arbitrum, testnet, and Rinkeby has been removed from production, so you will be able to use mainnet, Gnosis chain, and Arbitrum in production. And if you want to use the test networks, you have to wait on development. I fixed the governance information page, where now we can also see what after we merge it, the repetition percentage of every address. I removed the permissions table that wasn't used and fix an issue where we were detecting the wrong register schemes. Now we have only 3 register schemes in Gnosis chain: the contribution reward, multi-call, and a scheme registrar. That happened after we removed the other schemes in Gnosis chain. And now the same thing should happen on mainnet, where we are going to have again only the schemes that we need, which I think are going to be 3 multi-cores, contribution reward, and an ENA and an ENS provider.
Cool. Thank you for that. And then moving on to the next discussion item. What do we have here? And then the blockchain review and report proposal. And I see Tammy on the call. So Tammy, maybe you want to give some background here?
Yeah, so I initially referenced the budget proposal from September 2021 because I think that was the last quarter that I was working full time as, I guess, like quote unquote counsel for DXgov. Basically, like we did some stuff through that. The main thing, of course, is what we just talked about, was trying to figure out some payment solutions for European developers, which is Dave took on a lot of that work with working with MME and the related legal costs associated with setting that entity up. One of the line items on that budget was in relation to hiring a external analysis blockchain analysis firm to review essentially our treasury. The reason for that was initially because we were having issues in doing venture capital grants to projects through DX Ventures. I had done like a very ad hoc one with like a part-time contributor back, I think in June. That was like not sufficient, I would say, in most cases when we reached out to like venture related projects, depending on their like risk like profile, right? From there, I remember Dave at one point was unsure if we would need something like this to actually set up the legal entity. We found some workarounds through that. I think through this separate token contract address that's been KYC'd for the DevX AG. But basically things were on pause with that because the analysis firm dropped off because we didn't have a legal entity to contract with, whatever, fine. But then back in April, I think I came on one of the biz dev calls on a Monday and was talking more about kind of Russia sanctions and some of the stuff that Chainalysis was doing more, I think, API, like backend related in screening sanctioned addresses. The topic had gotten really hot, of course, with everything that had happened in the Ukraine and recently targeted sanctions directed at Russia. So because of that conversation, I spoke with the former head of engineering at Chainalysis, and someone not listed on the proposal is this guy named Matt. He currently works at Chainalysis, does a lot of research for them, and the two of them basically said, we can do like a review of the treasury, also suggest to do rep holder addresses, and then there's kind of been like a lot of back and forth of like what other scope should something like this cover. The real reason that I would suggest doing it is because since I left, I've been working with one company and a couple other projects that are part of the Blockchain Association. And they were contacted by the Financial Services Committee for the House of Representatives, specifically regarding like who in the industry is complying with like sanctions. Of course, on Russia, but just targeted sanctions in general. And when I say on Russia, I don't mean the whole country of Russia. There's specific addresses that have been put on this like targeted sanction list. And when I say addresses, I mean Bitcoin addresses and like sanctioned addresses. So yeah, that was the purpose of this, but I think it's important to see what you all think of it at this point now that it's been, I think, 2.5 months.
Yeah, I can just add the benefits I see to this. So first of all, in this space that doesn't really have regulations in countries for like the world we live in, like self-regulation and setting examples and best practices, which we've done in a number of scenarios, is always a really positive thing, and being proactive about it. Doing a report that maybe like, because there's an idea of doing this every quarter, which is not really what we want to do, but doing a one-off report that shows that the money that came into DXDAO Treasury was that we could share publicly, because the one we did was only a private one-off one that we shared with one set of lawyers. It's not a public one. Having a report that shows that all the money that went into the DXDAO Treasury came from wallets that were not flagged or sanctioned is a very valuable asset to have for standards, for if anyone comes looking at the money, and then also in scenarios where we want to make grants or investments to companies in different countries and places. or even contributors want to get paid by the DAO, it's very powerful to know that that money is not tainted money from like bad wallets that came into the treasury. And that can be a one-off report that will always exist. And that's a very valuable asset. And we can hopefully share that publicly. And I think other DAOs will probably want to follow that example. And eventually that, like a lot of DAOs will do that. And we'd probably be one of the first public DAOs to release something like that. And so, and then as I know there were some questions about the cost, it 20K for that asset, owning that asset and being able to share that publicly. After talking with people, like, yeah, I was at a Chainalysis event. I've talked to a bunch of people there. Like the cost is often much higher than that. And like you pay per wallet and things like that. So this is a one-off cost, and 20K is not cheap, but it's compared to what it could be. I think this is actually a decent price. But the question is, do we think that, people ask, is this like good to have, or is it like, do we need this today? There's not like another specific reason we need it this week, but like, I think that would be a valuable asset for the DAO to have basically going forward. And, rep holders, and there's new rep holders join. So the rep holders is less interesting to me, but knowing that the money that came into DXDAO that is being used and being spent on all of the things that DXDAO does is a valuable like badge that we could publish, on our docs and on our website and things like that overall. But that's my perspective.
Yeah. So I think it would be valuable only if there was a specific request or need for what that would be used for. Because I think like the concern is if someone does come asking for this, then the assumption would be that this report that we've already created would be usable for that. But like, to me, it makes much more sense to wait until you actually get asked for that to spend the money on that, because then we know for sure that the report that's produced will actually be useful for what it is intended to need. And so, yeah, I made a comment on this there that I think this is much more of a nice to have, considering kind of everything that's going on with the market right now. We kind of did some expenses a couple of weeks ago, but we're like, the burn rate is rising. I just don't think this is like justifies the 20K for right now. Just because if this was needed, then we could go out and engage someone to do that. And then I guess the last comment I made on here, or we kind of talked about the Q4 legal budget signal proposal that originally said this report would cost $10,000, and then that proposal has gone over in terms of cost to $53,000. So I'm again just a little concerned about the cost here. And then the last point is, we are still looking for a DAO council. We've got a couple different candidates that we're talking about here. Some people have been interviewed, maybe some people listening at home. We're going to chat more about this with the Contributor X team this week. But just as Dave was experiencing setting up the entity with MME, I think it is better to have someone full-time focused on this, because actually with Dave's efforts in MME, which is really good that we've got this DevX AG set up now, I think it took away from some of the things he could have focused on in the treasury and governance aspects. And so I think if we are going to engage in doing something like this, I think it makes sense to have a DAO council that we are currently considering to execute on that going forward. So like, I think with that, like, as I said here, I'm right now a no on this in its current form, but something we should be considering, mindful of making sure that we're regulatory compliant whenever, always.
I hear you, Chris. But I do think you're conflating the $53,000 to $40,000 to set up the DevX company. And just based on my experience and time that I've now previously put into this, and based on conversations that I've had with you all in doing this, it's actually not easy to find people if you're requested, first of all, two things. When the House Financial Services Committee requested whether or not you're complying with sanctions, they're not saying forward thinking, are you complying with sanctions? It's what are you doing now? Like, what policies and procedures do you have in place already, and what have you already done to comply with sanctions? Because that's the nature of the law. It's not about, hey, let me ask you to now be compliant. It's, have you been compliant? So actually having the report, you can't, make up for it in the future to pretend as if you're acting in good faith in the past, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is, like I said, finding people to do this. It took me a bit of time because, like as Sky said, it's quite expensive. And without a legal entity, maybe now easier with DevX, but it's very difficult to find people who are skilled enough to actually take on this work via an on-chain proposal because they're in the compliance sector. So I was fortunately, through my contacts, able to reach out to two people that I think are more than qualified to take care of this now, and they may not be available in the future. Both of them have full-time jobs, and they had actually just asked me to post this. And they gave a timeline of 3 weeks to have it completed on their behalf because I know you all and I'm familiar with you. And I figured, kind of like other clients I have aside from my in-house work at Open, that I would just, kind of pro rata payment, kind of like as outside counsel for this work, though I don't think that should take away from any efforts you've now worked towards in finding a new counsel for the position to like advise the DAO. So I think, if you can't find people that easily to do something like this, better to do it now. And also, again, I know the treasury is being affected by the price of Ethereum, but the treasury is still hefty at $20 million and a $20,000 cost currently for something that should not change next quarter and can be, on file and provided, which is kind of how AML law works, generally speaking, is I think good to do, like kind of a need, especially based on the climate of everything going on with geopolitical stuff. And honestly, bear markets tend to lead to more regulatory enforcement, not less. So it's obviously a deterrent. Hopefully you never have to use it, but it would be better to have and publicize than not.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting for other people here, or maybe a signal or a vote in the forum, like to get a view on if DXDAO community thinks there's a benefit to having this, having compliance ahead of time versus only when we need it. And then like as a contributor to DXDAO, would you be more comfortable having a public report that shows that all of the DXDAO treasury funds have not come from any bad wallets and addresses and things, and like that could help attract contributors to DXDAO potentially that like are like scared to work for a DAO because they don't know where the money came from, and it creates additional comfort plus preemptive compliance for things that may come in the future. So, but I agree, 20K is not deep. Yeah,
maybe just I'm mindful of time because we have like a huge discussion, I think, with stETH coming up. So maybe any last comments here to the forum?
Yeah, I'll try and fit mine in a couple of minutes. On one hand, I see this as something timeless that could be somewhat beneficial, not just to see what happened in the past, but if there is any claim drop in the future, if you know that a certain address been associated with something, you could exclude that address from a potential claim drop in the future. But on the other hand, I've been following like Alex Chervinsky and Gabe Shapiro. If it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's likely a duck. So like the bonding curve is a permissionless contract. And for the record, because this is recorded, we're a bunch of random people from all over the world. Like this is no company. So it's not like there has ever been any sale. Like it's a permissionless contract. Addresses, random addresses globally have interacted with it. So it's like the more you behave as a company, the more you are perceived as a company. So I'm somewhere in the middle. On one hand, I see benefits and I see it as something timeless, neither urgent nor something to postpone. On the other hand, I'm still questioning like how needed it is.
Cool. Yeah, and let's keep chatting the forum. It's actually one of the few posts we have lately that has some good conversation. It's good to get, I think, more conversation in the forum there. So maybe take some of these thoughts and put it on the thread there.
Okay, just wanted to add 2 points. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I hope everyone's okay with, based on my time and energy put into this, I would request, payment for my time. Even if you don't go forward with that's completely separate from the 20K for these analysts. And I'll just let them know, we can weigh in a little bit more over the next week and just let me know what you think. But yeah, I hope you also take weight from what I've said. I've now been working in this field and was counsel to DXgov for quite some time. And that should mean something, but it's, up to you all to decide what you want to do.
Well, you've got rep too, so it's all the governance. Cool. So let's chat. Is it stETH? What are we saying? stETH, staked ETH? I think the Lido ETH. It's always very confusing with all of the staked ETH ones. But yeah, obviously market's been changing a lot. There's a whole bunch of things going on, but one of them is a potential stETH peg. And there's been some good discussion in the forum about this from Keenan. And so I'm gonna turn over to him. But just before we do that, Keenan, I do want to kind of, in terms of framing the discussion here, there are currently 2 proposals to send 500 ETH to the multi-sig to stake into Stakewise, which is stETH, which is not the one that is depegging. This was part of a Signal proposal that was passed by about a month ago. That was actually submitted by Stakewise to stake an additional 2K ETH. So that's this one. That's the first of 4 that would pass potentially in 7.5 hours, and then there's one that was just boosted that would pass in 7 days. So yeah, that's kind of where we're in the discussion. Keenan, I don't know if you wanted to set the table in terms of what you think kind of the opportunity is here, and then maybe Dave can kind of reply with his thoughts that he had.
Yeah, thanks for kicking this off. Please bear with me here. Didn't get an incredible sleep last night, but I think stETH, staked ETH, I don't know what we want to call it. I like stETH or stETH just for the fun of it. But I think it represents a pretty sizable opportunity right now in the staked ETH kind of climate and liquid staking options. I am aware that there's some centralization factors to consider and maybe doesn't necessarily complement our strategy. But it's worth noting that the peg right now is about 5% off on staked ETH versus regular ETH, of course, about 0.95. I'll drop a chart here in the chat just for visual aid. And I'll also put this form thread if you have not yet seen it, but I think it's garnered quite a bit of attention here. But basically the idea is that the staked ETH is depegged. We have staked ETH. We want to stake our ETH. I think it just makes a lot of sense to, pick up some a little slowly and also position ourselves to snag it if there's a serious liquidation cascade or any serious depegging in the coming months. I don't want to go crazy on the discussion here. I think this has probably been started well by you, Chris, but happy to support and chat this.
Yeah, Dave. I guess there's really, I think when we think about this, right now DXDAO has 1,000 staked ETH. I think that's basically 10% of all of DXDAO's ETH. Of that staked ETH, 50% of it is in Lido staked ETH, 30% is in Rocket Pool, and 20% is in Stakewise. I think there is a pretty much undeniable market opportunity that fits DXDAO's financial risk profile, meaning DXDAO is super long ETH and there's an asset that could pay out in at a premium in a year or two or whatever, kind of whenever you're able to actually do withdrawals there. So from a financial risk perspective, I think it's pretty undeniable that there is some opportunity here. From a DXDAO priorities and goals perspective, I think acquiring more staked ETH supports the largest liquid staking derivative out there that I think has a serious concerns on serious decentralization concerns for Ethereum. And so one of the reasons that DXDAO engaged with Stakewise, and why Stakewise submitted that proposal was precisely because DXDAO, I think, is incumbent upon them as a responsible member of the Ethereum community that values decentralization to make sure that DXDAO is not contributing to the centralization of staking. So I think the question is like, how do we reconcile what is like a pretty clear, obvious market opportunity with the long-term, or not that really the core priorities of DXDAO in terms of promoting decentralization efforts. So I think that's what's kind of the balance here. I don't know if, like how far it go down or what other kind of different things that are there. But I think maybe there could be a discussion precisely because there is 1,000 ETH that's on its way to be staked right now in proposals, and also another 1,000 ETH that could be submitted to proposals over the next couple of days in relation to the Signal proposal that was passed just last month. So I think there maybe is a question, does it make sense to redirect some of those funds to staked ETH or stETH to take advantage of the Depeg rather than buying or purchasing Stakewise ETH, where the peg is still the same. Now, I think if we did that, there would definitely have to be a new proposal, and we kind of have to outline different things. But maybe those are some of the parameters that we could be considering here.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything Chris said. I think, one thing to keep in mind, of course, is also the Stakewise proposal that was submitted by Stakewise. And of course, we don't really sign contracts as a DAO, but it's probably passing an on-chain proposal is the closest to signing a contract we do, right? And I also think, we should definitely limit our exposure to Lido. So, it is currently 50% of our total staked ETH. And perhaps we should try to maintain it at that level, to limit it at a maximum of 50%. And so, I think probably makes sense to move forward with the first Stakewise proposal that's passing in a couple of hours. But potentially, out of those 2,000 total ETH, we could redirect 50% to Lido and still do 1,000 with Stakewise. But, we should definitely pass a proposal to do so, to kind of like override the former one. I know Stakewise, of course, put a lot of effort into it as well. And, of course, we also have an opportunity in the market which we want to take. But I think we should find an equilibrium between that and also just generally our exposure to Lido. Yeah. And also in the forum, there was discussion about limit orders. So I think, personally, I really doubt we'll see staked ETH at a 25% discount. Staked ETH is backed by ETH on the Beacon chain. There is some reward ETH that doesn't yet really exist until the merge happens, and you can't withdraw it. So there's kind of like a time delay. But I think like much larger funds or people will come in before we even reach a 25% discount. So probably it makes sense to give a bit more thought at how we should actually acquire Lido if we choose to do so, if it is through some limit orders or if we do just want to buy on the market. Because, there is a possibility, of course, that if we do set a limit order at a 25% discount, that it'll just never fill, right? So that's something to probably consider as well.
Nylon says he's got some Lido concerns. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh yeah, Dave, do you know where those charts are that show the breakdown of the validators that Keenan was asking? I was just looking.
Yeah, I was just Googling for it and I couldn't find it just now on hand.
Yeah, I couldn't find it anywhere when I was...
Oh, that's of like all ETH2 deposits? Is that what it is? Like what percentage Lido is of that?
Yeah, I was under the impression it was pretty bad and then it kind of reached a bit of a healthier ratio, but I can't find context on that now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Lido number one at like 33%, followed by Rocket Pool, apparently, as they've actually been growing significantly. But I'll see if I find there was actually a Bloomberg article. I think the link is in the Bloomberg article. I just need to find it.
So I was just like, as you were talking, I went to the forums and I see there's a proposal from Lido from like 2 weeks ago. It's called like preparing for the bear market, and it's to sell like 10K ETH, which is like 65% of their ETH, to DAI, and that sell would have given them like $17 million. Now it gives them like 9 or something. So like it's an interesting question, like about their runway, right? I feel like a lot of DAOs have been, or just like a lot of companies and DAOs have raised money, like diversified the treasury in market, and I don't think Lido has done that. So like interesting, like I don't know, just like wondering.
So that is
Yeah.
a forum post worth checking out because it's kind of like, but I think actually the reason was Lido, the company, has raised money and is capitalized, but that was asking for like Lido, the DAO, which only has ETH to diversify. And part of like the question in the forum, the discussion was like, wait, shouldn't development be funded out of like the funds that the company raised? But like, yeah, not to say I think there are concerns about Lido with that post, and also like in general, you're talking about the centralization concerns and things there. So I definitely don't think we should be putting all of our eggs in that basket alone. I think this is the one I have here is like the ETH2. There's like an ETH2 deposit there, which right says 35% of all ETH2 deposits are liquid staking, and then 32% of those, I think, or no, yeah. So 32% of all ETH2 deposits are Lido.
Yeah, and of all liquid tokens, 90.8% is
Yeah.
Lido. I shared
Yeah.
the link in the chat here.
Isn't there some statistic that Kraken is also like 20% or something?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
stake
Kraken
with
is,
us or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, here you
I
go.
think
There's
Lido,
6%.
then Kraken, then Coinbase, then Binance.
Oh, yeah, because Kraken's got a couple here. Yeah, well, this is an interesting, kind of point. And as I said, I think something to monitor, and that it would be something to take advantage of potentially with the existing ETH that's about to be staked, but kind of managing that with the centralization risk. I for one, like, don't think we should have more than 50% of DXgov staked ETH be Lido staked ETH. And then also managing like whether we would want to change course from Stakewise after they engaged with us. So some things to think about. And yeah, there's 2 proposals live. The first one would be about 7 hours would pass, and that would stake 500 ETH through Stakewise. And then the other one would be 7 days from now. So vote and express your voice in the forum.
When DXDAO started thinking about staking some of its ETH, as DXDAO always does, it's like kind of test the waters, start with a little bit, do some more. Actually, let's do all 3 different versions of staking. And then we kind of, had a bunch of, I think it was 2,000 or whatever. We had a bunch of ETH staked, and we kind of just settled on that. And there was not like a desire to, stake 75% of the ETH that DXDAO had. And now we're coming into like a newer environment where, yeah, Lido Stakewise did a proposal to stake more ETH. Karpatkey is saying, DXDAO should stake more ETH. There's this discount on Lido for staking more ETH. Was there a reason why we didn't stake more ETH in the beginning, or was it just because we were like easing into it? And then what has changed that now DXDAO, because there's always a benefit to just holding plain ETH too in this world. And I know we do have plain ETH, but what is the end goal for what percentage of the ETH that DXDAO maybe holds should be staked at the end of all of this discussions?
Yeah, I don't think that's changed, right? That was the conversation we had with Stakewise, right? We did the first 1,000 ETH, and then that was a conversation that happened over a couple of months. We were like, okay, we would like to do more, and then they increased it to 2,000. I'm not sure if the Depeg means that DXDAO should stake more ETH than it has already planned to stake. I think that's like a separate conversation. I think the specific opportunity is that the Depeg is going on while DXDAO is trying to stake another 2,000 ETH. And so then it makes, I think, sense in that moment. There's a separate conversation of whether this Depeg or something else about the broader market that's been going on over the last month, does that make DXDAO more likely to stake? I would actually think less likely, just because you do see that even things that are backed by ETH, you know, if there's a liquidity mismatch, there is kind of a little bit of concern there. So I think the conservative nature has been pretty good, but that's a discussion that maybe we should have, that DXDAO should be staking more ETH. But I think right now it's more, given the ETH that is about to be staked, does it make sense for that? Does the Depeg represent an opportunity to do something different with that?
Yeah, and then there's also like liquidity, and access to liquidity is always something that should be thought about. Like, we've had some dollar stable tokens that maybe are less liquid than some other ones, and that we've held less of those, and then we actually got rid of one of them because maybe there were some concerns. So like the one benefit to Lido being the one that most people use is generally it has the most liquidity.
Well, I mean, like literally right now, that's not true. Like all the other staking derivatives are 1-to-1, but Lido is not. It's 95%, right?
You discount, yeah, but I'm talking about just liquidity in general, like use in an ecosystem, right?
Well, I mean, all the other ones have pegs or are liquid at 1-to-1, and like stETH is not liquid at 1-to-1. And I think it's because being used as collateral, like people are levering up on it. Like it's a whole bunch of reasons for it. I know stETH is like a bigger one in general. I don't think there's much of a liquidity concern for these, mostly because they all have pretty good curve pools. But then the concerns become like other reasons that would affect the liquidity of it, like if it's being used as collateral. And there, you say staked ETH, that's stETH, Dave, for MakerDAO.
MakerDAO, I know right now they're onboarding Rocket Pool, and I'm not. I think stake-wise as well. I'm not 100% sure, but Rocket Pool, 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, this does. I know we're running over on time here, but it does kind of bring up a point here at the end. You can see who commented on the post is Karpatkey, and that was the conversation we had last week on that proposal. I think there was a lot of questions and good discussion we had last week on the governance call about whether that would be something that DXDAO would be comfortable with, especially given like the size of the treasury. I know we don't have enough time kind of to go into it now, but I do think just given like the market conditions, we'd have to really think a little bit more about this and how we could figure out a way to make it work, and whether we could see if we can find a way to leverage Karpatkey's expertise without giving up the sovereignty of the treasury, or looking for some way for them to provide services in that. So I don't know if anyone has any quick thoughts on that here, or we can kind of talk about that later next week or on the forum.
I proposed a method that I think solves a lot of the issues of DXDAO being able to own the funds while using something that's nimble. I shared it, in a smaller group, but I can either put it on the forum, or we can create a new thing and share it with Karpatkey and see if they want to do that. But it leverages Gnosis Safe, which is what the tool that they all want to use, and it also allows DXDAO to be the owner rather than a single person. And all of the tech that allows that to happen exists. The only thing is you'd have some longer period. You couldn't do instant transactions. You'd have to have like a 9-hour or a 6-hour or maybe a 12-hour window to execute transactions.
Yeah, and I guess when you're ready, definitely put that up on the forum, because I keep the conversation going. Because Nathan's saying like leverage here, like in a lot of ways, the only thing that DXDAO can't do now in this existing treasury infrastructure from like a sovereignty perspective, that Karpatkey is suggesting, the only thing that it can't do now is really leverage, right? There's no leverage in the treasury, but DXDAO could be doing more in terms of market making. Or being an AMMs with DXD or with another one. It could be more aggressive in like using limit orders and the GP relayer for other diversification, but that would take like kind of planning and expertise in addition to the execution part. So yeah, I am thinking it's important, that we keep our eye on the long-term prize of like, this will help some with yield, but the best, the big opportunity is like how to build these trustless systems. And so part of it maybe is just keeping things going with Karpatkey, who could be a partner in that, maybe along with Mimic, even if that's not something that we're like, everything is figured out now, just trying to build towards that future with them.
Yeah, the other potential partner too, which we had kind of forgotten about there, I think, is this. I forgot what they rebranded to. Melonport became something else. Sky, do you remember what the name?
Enzyme. It's Enzyme.
Enzyme. Yeah,
And
they're like
they rebranded from something else too. They were another one before that, or they have like a different name for their foundation.
It's an Avant-Garde is the name of their like independent, kind of like what the team became later. So anyway, I mean, I think it makes sense to reassess things, and I agree that I think the real goal here should be what are we building long term, and who are the best partners for that? Like, does